I think the whole point of work like this is to get the discourse back to that kind of middle path where you're not always choosing between art and science, but what you're actually getting at is the way that life is experienced, which is never just one thing.
All of the photographs, or the groups of photographs is perhaps a more accurate way to put them, there are different things that ground you in the normal perceptual world. And they're really it's quite radically different if you look at something like a beach-based image like that, a cityscape shot from above like that, and a dancer. They are very much about place or a person or whatever. There's something very concrete that we don't normally associate with time-space concepts in a scientific context.
I want to come back to your point about the ways that you can, the conventionality of some of these images as being compelling and sort of why it's compelling. And this goes back to your point about perception, which is what we sort of fill in. So that we want to sort of put that line of the vanishing perspective into that landscape. And instead we're sort of aware that we're looking at something else, that we're looking at something that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise, because we can't see time. We can only see space. And so I think some of the power of the images is the way that he's sort of working with things that we recognize conventionally from our kind of visual literacy, and then sort of the way that he does something kind of different with it.
I've walked up in your ACE opening and heard somebody look at one of these and say, the first thing that almost anybody says is, wow. And then the second thing is, what's going on? And more than one person has said he's using Photoshop. There's no way you could create this image with Photoshop. It has nothing to do with Photoshop. In this one, the shadows will go both ways. What that means is that two people went by the slit, but they were going in an opposite direction. But in one case, the shadow came by the camera first, in the other case, the shadow came by the camera after they went by. And they look that way. If you look at another picture, which is a mercato in Italy,
piazza.
There's a piazza, and there's a whole bunch of people at a walking into and out of a market. But if you look at the image, the picture, everybody looks like they're going in the same direction. I guarantee you that everybody wasn't leaving the market at the same time, but everybody enters, they get turned around. So some things about it are just never going to look like a space image. The directions all get turned around, and the shadows get turned around.
Before we go too much farther, that maybe somebody should explain to people exactly what's happening with the camera. Because we all keep talking about it, but we all know, and it took us all a while to figure it out.
So I'll jump in for a second and describe a bit about the process. All of the photographs that we look at here and in the exhibition at ACE are timelines. The left side of the photograph happens before the right side. So I have a camera that's akin, not to a normal camera, it's more akin to your desktop scanner, where you open your desktop scanner, you put in a drawing or whatever and close it, and this light bar you see goes with the motor, right? And when that light bar goes by, there's actually a light source bouncing off your image, but there's a sensor that's a strip. It's a slit. It records as it works its way down. And I have this camera that Barry reminds me how much I paid for, that has, it's the same technology, but instead of scanning like this, turns and looks at the world like this. And instead of having a motor that drags it like this, it has a motor that scans the world like this. And it produces extremely high resolution, in a slow scanning, panoramic images. So I now have this process where I can shoot timelines, and I get curious about what that is. So in this case, this is all the sequence. A red car drove by under my balcony in Rome before all these other cars drove by, and the last one, two motorcycles and a white car drove by, and they drove by fast, and these people were outside the Termini train station, and they're all carrying bags or luggage. The convention, the sort of anchoring piece in this is the pedestrians. that even though the shadows, you get a hint from the shadows that there's some human form there.
Right.
But then when you go in close on it, finally, you can look and see that it's a bird's eye view of a person.
You know, you look at, by comparison, some of the ones of the waves crashing, it's almost like you could get out of there not even really knowing that it wasn't just a photograph. And we were trying to figure out what that was, and I realized it was because water, especially tidal patterns, for example, already look like that. So you're looking at an ocean and you're already seeing it's slight change every time. You're already seeing, but you're already experiencing it as a pattern and something that kind of self-describes and self-repeats. And that's a moment where nature is kind of already doing what these photographs would do.
These renderings, and a space-time rendering is something that's going to give you a shifted perspective. Either the perspective itself is interesting, or it points out the limits of perception or the subtleties of perception.
So what he's done is take something that's really very unfamiliar, that is space and time, and made for us a relationship that's very, very close. It's the art. I mean, he's basically taken the time scan and made it look semi-familiar to us. You could take them and make them look very, very different if you were really forgetting about trying to make them space-like.